Hi guys, it's Grandpa again. Here we are on the last chapter of the book, chapter 20. Last chapter, Mr. Potter is being given some choices. He can put all of his penguins into a movie, and the movie would be going around to all of the movie theaters, and he would be making lots and lots of money. He would become rich, he and Mrs. Popper. Or Admiral Drake wants to take his penguins up to the North Pole and put them up there, and they would be the first penguins on the North Pole, and they could be named the Popper Penguins. Let's see what Mr. Popper decides he's going to do. Here we are on chapter 20. 20 looks like this. XX. Remember, an X stands for 10. So we got 10, 20, chapter 20. And this chapter is called Farewell, Mr. Popper. It was a very hard decision to make. After the visitors had gone, Mr. and Mrs. Popper sat and discussed what was best for everybody. Mrs. Popper could see the advantages of both offers, as she pointed these out without trying to influence him. I feel like the penguins are really your responsibility, she said, and you must make up your mind. It was a pale and haggard Mr. Popper who was ready to announce his decision the next day. Pale and haggard means he was white, like a ghost, because he was kind of scared, and he was haggard. This was very hard on him. Hard decision for him to make. Mr. Klein, he said, I want you to know how much I appreciate your offer of putting my birds into the movies, but I am afraid I have to refuse. I do not believe the life in Hollywood would be good for my penguins. Then he turned to Admiral Drake. Admiral Drake, I'm going to give you the birds. In doing this, I am considering the birds first of all. I know that they have been comfortable and happy with me. Lately, though, with the excitement and the warmer weather coming, I've been worried about them. The birds have done so much for me, and I have to do what is best for them. After all, they belong in a cold climate. And then I can't help being sorry for those men up at the North Pole without any penguins to play with to help them spend their time. Your government will thank you, Mr. Popper, announced the Admiral. Well, congratulations, Admiral, said Mr. Klein. Maybe you're right at that, Mr. Popper. Hollywood might have been too much for the birds. I wish you'd let me make one short movie with them here in New York, though, because before they go, just some pictures of that sort of thing that they do on the stage, you know. We'd show the film everywhere with the announcement that these are the famous Popper penguins that are being taken to the North Pole by Admiral Drake of the United States Arctic Penguin Foundation, or something like that. Oh, I'd like that very much, said Mr. Popper. We would pay you, of course, continued Mr. Klein. Not a fortune, as we would have if you'd let us give them a contract, but say $25,000? Oh, we could use that, said Mrs. Popper. It will be very quiet at 432 Proudfoot Avenue, said Mr. Popper when everybody had left. Mrs. Popper did not answer. She knew that nothing she could say would really comfort him. However, said Mr. Popper, now that spring is here, a lot of people will be wanting their houses painted again, so I guess we better be getting back. Anyway, said Bill, we've had 10 whole weeks of vacation right here in the middle of the year. Not many children in Stillwater can say that. And here's a picture of everybody. That would be Admiral Drake in the middle. He's a big guy, isn't he? And there's the man that wants to make the movie, and there's Mr. Popper. The next day, the cameraman arrived to make the picture of the penguins doing their tricks. It was arranged that the Poppers should stay in New York just long enough to see the expedition off. Meanwhile, in the harbor, the great sailing ship of Admiral Drake was being made ready for its long trip to the North Pole. Every day, huge boxes of supplies of all sorts were hustled on board. The most comfortable quarters on the ship were turned over to the Penguins, who were going to be the cause of this voyage. Captain Cook was already quite familiar with the ship, since it was the same one that the Admiral had sailed on the South Pole, where Captain Cook had often seen it. Greta, too, had seen vessels of this kind. The two of them were kept busy showing and explaining everything to Nelson, Columbus, Louisa, Jenny, Scott, Magellan, Adelina, Isabella, Ferdinand, and Victoria. The sailors all took the greatest delight in watching the curious little birds in their explorations. "This looks like it's going to be a pretty lively trip," they would say. "Those pauper penguins certainly live up to their reputation." But at last everything was ready, and the day came when the paupers were to go down and say goodbye to the penguins. Bill and Janie ran all over the ship and did not want to leave when it was time to draw up the gangplank. The Admiral shook hands with them, and Mrs. Pauper and thanked them for having helped to train the extraordinary penguins that were to be a real contribution to science. Mr. Pauper had gone below to say a private farewell to his birds. All that kept him from breaking down completely was the knowledge of what he was doing was best for them. First, he said goodbye to all the younger penguins. Then he said goodbye to Greta, who had saved Captain Cook. And last of all, he leaned over and said a special goodbye to Captain Cook, who had come and made life so different for Mr. Pauper. Then he wiped his eyes, straightened his back, and went up on deck to say goodbye to Admiral Drake. And there's a sad Mr. Pauper. "Goodbye, Admiral Drake," he said. "Goodbye?" repeated the Admiral. "Why, what do you mean by saying goodbye? Aren't you coming with us?" "Me? Go with you to the North Pole?" "Why, of course, Mr. Pauper. But how could I go with you? I'm not an explorer or a scientist. I'm just a house painter." "Oh, you're the keeper of the penguins, aren't you?" roared the Admiral. "Man alive! Aren't those penguins the reason for this whole expedition? And who's going to see that they're well and happy if you're not along? Go put on one of those fur coats like the rest of us. We're pulling anchor in a minute." "Mama!" shouted Mr. Pauper to Mrs. Pauper, who had already gone up the gangplank. "I'm going along too. I'm going too. Admiral Drake says he needs me. Mama, do you mind if I don't come home for a year or two?" "Oh, as to that," said Mrs. Pauper, "I'll miss you very much, my dear, but we have money to live on for a few years, and in winter it'll be much easier to keep the house tidy without a man sitting around all day. I'll be getting back to Stillwater. Tomorrow is the day for the meeting of the Ladies' Aid and Missionary Society, and I'll be back just in time. So, goodbye, my love, and good luck." "Goodbye and good luck," said the children, and the penguins, hearing their voices, scuttled up onto the deck and stood there behind the Admiral and Mr. Pauper. Then they all solemnly lifted their flippers and waved as the great ship moved slowly down the river towards the sea. The end. And there's Mr. Pauper, and he's going to the North Pole with his penguins. Pretty good book, huh? And it had a nice happy ending. I hope you enjoyed the book. We'll do another one soon. Thanks for joining me. See you later. Bye.